All right, Braves fans, let's get rolling. I'm George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. Well, guys, it's been a little while since I've been back with you, and a lot's happened. A lot of negative has happened, and the one big negative is very obvious that you guys all know that Ronald Acuna is down with another torn ACL. So, with one ill-advised steal attempt, what has already been a strange, disjointed, sputtering season by the Braves just got much worse, much more challenging. As you guys know, Ronald is down with his second torn ACL, this time to the left knee. His first ACL tear occurred in 2021 to the right knee. And it's a devastating injury to him personally, and obviously to the team, who we're honestly waiting. I think they all were waiting for Ronald to take off offensively. And of course, that never happened this year. It's just kind of been a strange year already for Ronald, hitting 250. It just, I mean, I'm sure by his own count, he just has not played well. And now he goes down with this second torn ACL. And obviously, he's not going to have an opportunity to turn around what has been a frustrating season for him, his least productive season to date. So, what I want to do in this episode is really dedicate this episode to Ronald's injury and discuss the various ripple effects it will have on him and on the team. So, first, let's recount what happened to cause Ronald's injury in the first place, and then obviously we can go from there. So after doubling to lead off Sunday's game in Pittsburgh against the Pirates, Ronald attempts to steal. This steal attempt was not a normal steal attempt. He was obviously looking at the catcher who was lobbing the pitch, sorry, lobbing the ball back to the pitcher. And obviously he'd done this multiple times. Ronald was waiting for him to do it again and was going to take off for third base. The catcher, of course, does not do that. Ronald notices it probably mid-throw, stops, turns, pivots pivots with his right leg, plants with his left leg, and then just quickly crumples to the ground in immediate pain. So, anyone who has seen their fair share of ACL tears knows that non-contact cutting is the number one cause for ACL tears, right? That cut and plant. And of course, you see it most often with football players. You don't see it as much with baseball players, but you certainly saw it here with Ronald. So Ronald was hopeful after the game that it wasn't the ACL. He said he didn't feel it pop. He didn't hear it pop. The pain wasn't as great as it was in 2021. But an MRI later that evening revealed a full tear of his left ACL. So the worst possible scenario happened for Ronald. So, obviously as Braves fans, I mean, this is just super deflating. Um, and it's another blow, right? I mean, we've already experienced losing Spencer Strider for the year, and now here we go again with Ronald. And, it's a little hard to take as a fan. I mean, it's just a reminder. This is what being a fan can be. I mean, it can be tremendous disappointment. Injuries, of course, happen, but they've really seemed to happen a lot to this 2024 version of the Braves. So, anyways, back to Ronald. Why I don't want to blame Ronald for the injury at all, but as a fan, you certainly can't help but wish he wouldn't try those types of plays and steal attempts that really pressure his lateral movement. You might remember the rundown he got into in spring training, which was also on a steal attempt. That caused his right knee to flare up and, of course, miss the last of spring training. Probably helped, just encourage a really slow start for him offensively. And then we have this left knee thing. So again, I'm not blaming Ronald for it. I do wonder, and I'll get into this a little bit later in the episode, if he has to adjust a little bit of how he plays, and very specifically, I don't want him to change much because he's one of the greatest players in the game, but specifically how he runs the bases and when he attempts to steal bases. So, when you think back to 2021, that injury was not like this injury in that, it was a jumping attempt at a fly ball. He lands awkwardly on his knee or on his leg, causing that right ACL to tear. And that definitely seemed like a much more freak injury that just couldn't be avoided. I mean, you're gonna eventually, or you're going to at times leap for balls in the outfield. You come down wrong one time, the ACL goes. I mean, you can't really, you can't plan for that. Um, so that one seemed a little different than this one, where I think you probably could have avoided it, maybe. But then there have been some other um, interesting points made about this injury. Some believe that his left ACL sprain in his rookie year may have weakened his left knee and predisposed him to tear it. And then there also have been some studies out there that suggest that there's an increased risk in tearing your opposite ACL after your initial tear to your other knee. And probably that's because you tend to favor your other knee, for 1 to 2 years. Ronald may have even favored, it's kind of an awkward way that he planted on that left knee. It's almost like he didn't want to plant on the right one, so he pivoted on the right one, planted on the left one. Anyways, in some ways, these factors may suggest that this simply was bound to happen. I think especially if he had partially injured that left ACL back in his rookie year, that might be why it didn't pop. It was just very worn before it went. But all this is conjecture, and ultimately, it doesn't really matter that much, right? Because either way, the knee is torn. Um, so considering Ronald tore his right ACL in July of 2021, let's think about how long it will take for Ronald to potentially come back. And of course, any kind of rehab, it can have setbacks, so timetables can adjust and change as you go. But if you assume the best with Ronald's rehab, in 2021, he's injured in July. He returns by mid-April of 2022. Now, he himself will admit that he might have come back a little early from that. He was very antsy to come back. Um, but one might expect Ronald to be able to rehab and return to regular play by opening day of next season because, again, he injured this one, almost 2 months earlier than he injured the last one. So I think the best case scenario for Ronald would be for him to return for full spring training. And that would be, of course, the best case scenario, not only because it's early, but because he would get a full spring training to get ready for the season, both physically, but also just at the plate, which of course we know is really important. We also know that Ronald wasn't actually fully back in 2022. Yes, he got back on the field, but he wasn't physically totally himself. Um, so, that's something to take into consideration. Now, the other thing, though, and this is the silver lining to this injury, is the last ACL was his back knee. And we know that that had huge impacts to his swing and his power in 2022 coming back. This one that he's rehabbing is his front leg. And I don't think it will impact his swing and his return near as much. And that's actually backed up by statistics. There's several articles out there you can find talking about this. Baseball players who have come back from ACLs, if it's their front leg, it has far less impact and maybe no impact on their swing when they get back. So that's good news for Ronald. Hopefully that will be the case for him. So honestly, look, my first reaction when Ronald went down was not for the team, but it was for Ronnie himself. I mean, he was very transparent. The first time he tore his ACL in 2021, he's been very transparent about how hard it was on him. I mean, you're talking about, depression, probably, all those layers of grief they talk about, those levels of grief. He probably went through all of them. And I think it's probably likely that he's dealing with it a little better this time since he's a little older, he's a little more mature. He's gone through this before. Now he at least knows what to expect even though he knows it's going to be hard. But I still just really felt for the guy. This is going to be grueling rehab. It's going to be difficult again, mentally, emotionally, certainly physically. It's going to be painful to undergo all of this again. So Acuna's first public reaction, you probably saw this, was on social media. In case you didn't see it, Ronnie just said, sorry, heartbroken emoji, and a crying emoji. And, that does make you just feel for the guy. It speaks volumes, I think, and is a little window into Ronald, that the first thing he would say is sorry to the fans, and I guess to the Braves as well. Of course, he has nothing to be sorry about, but you do appreciate his heart for not being out there on the field, and he probably feels like he's letting his team down and that sort of thing. But hopefully fans can express to Ronald how much he means to us and kind of lift him up. This is when fans are really important to players in that kind of way. So certainly he is heartbroken to have to go through this again, but hopefully he can lean on people around him. Since that last injury, he's gotten married, so I'm sure that has a bigger influence on him. And I even wonder if Chipper Jones might reach out to him. Considering Chipper went through 2 ACL tears himself, he knows how difficult it is, but he also knows how you can come back from it. And Chipper certainly did that. So hopefully a phone call or something can happen there. But yeah, it just stinks for Ronnie to miss this much more of his prime. I think that's what's lost, and he's never really going to get back. This guy's a potential Hall of Famer, a likely Hall of Famer, as long as his body can hold up. But he's really, had a lot of his prime years taken away from him with these injuries. An ESPN article recently noted that only 2% of baseball injuries are ACL tears. Actually, baseball knee injuries are ACL tears. So ACL tears are very rare for baseball players. And here are two Braves greats who have undergone 2 ACL injuries. Acuna having to do it right now. But all that being said, I'm fully convinced that Ronald's first ACL tear helped fuel and focus him towards this MVP season he just had in 2023. And as much as this is going to be really hard for him, he can either let it defeat him or he can come back even better, which I think is what's going to happen. And that's really, really scary for the rest of the league. And it should be encouraging to Braves fans who are down right now, missing Ronnie. So just today, so guys, I'm coming to you on Thursday. Just today, in a press conference, Ronald appeared for the first time since the injury with his interpreter, and he did seem to be in really good spirits, all things considered. So thankfully, he said that he has felt tremendous support from the fans. He said overwhelming support from fans, from teammates, from the organization. So that's really good to see, and it's good to see him in generally good spirits. He was smiling. I mean, some of that might just be for the cameras and for the public, but it's still good to see it. He also noted that he was antsy the last time he came back, and he might be a bit more patient to come back this time. And again, I mentioned this earlier. He came back in 9 months last time, which is not super quick nowadays for ACL rehab. But I wonder if that 9 months might be more like 10 or 11 months this time around. Now, again, the timetable for that 10 months would mean that he would be back for the start of the regular season, but he might miss some spring training. If you're talking 11 months, now you're getting into the 2025 season a little bit. But certainly you can expect the Braves to be as patient as they need to be with this second knee of Ronald's. Ronald also said that the surgery will be on next Tuesday in Los Angeles. So I'll certainly be praying for Ronald and for his knee, for his family, for this surgery to go well. Obviously, not just for his life on the bases, but just his life overall, for that knee to be fully healed. So yeah, obviously physical challenges are coming for Ronald to rehab this knee. ACL injuries are more rare in baseball, but ACL injuries, generally speaking, people come back from it, and especially baseball players come back from it really well because baseball does not require as many hard cuts and pivots as basketball and certainly football, which is probably the hardest on your knees. Soccer maybe as well. So it really should not limit Ronald. I don't think we're getting any kind of lesser Ronald Acuna when he comes back fully, whenever that is. Especially Ronald at the plate. I already mentioned this. It's the front leg. Um, Even stealing bases and playing right field, I think really he shouldn't be limited. I mean, we saw Ronald steal over 70 bases after his right ACL. But as I've already mentioned, I think the only adjustment he must make when he comes back is limiting how often he has to hard stop, pivot, and cut on the bases. And really, the only time he has to do that a lot is when he gets caught stealing, he gets in rundowns. And of course, that's how this one popped on him. So he needs to be decisive on the base paths. Don't start and stop so much. Limit the chances you get in rundowns, and it just limits the wear and the stress that you're putting on those knees. Ronald is not going to come back and suddenly be Marcell Ozuna physically, right? He's still going to be dynamic Ronald Acuna when he comes back. He can still be a 40-40 or really even maybe one day a 50-50 kind of player. He can do that again. He just needs to tactically adjust, I think, how he operates on the bases. All right, so the impact on the Braves obviously is huge. You're losing one of the best players in baseball. Now, he hasn't really performed as one of the best players in baseball this year yet, but of course, the potential for him to turn it around at any moment was right there. I actually think at the plate he was starting to do that. So it's obviously the impact is obviously huge. And, you know, again, the impact of losing Strider and Acuna, if you had told if someone had told you that that was going to happen at the beginning of the season, you would have been like, the season's going to stink. And it kind of has so far. Losing both of them within one calendar month, basically, is stomach churning to think about. Makes you want to run to the bathroom and just hurl. But that's what has happened. Um, but, what I told you guys in the offseason was that no other team in baseball was better equipped to endure major injuries. And obviously, this season is certainly testing that idea. The Phillies have played out of their minds so far. Yes, they've had the easiest schedule in baseball, but they've also played great. And so that's just the case, right? They have a pretty big lead right now in the NL East. I think it's at 6 games. Currently. So while everything about this season for the Braves, outside of a few guys like Ozuna and Chris Sale has been awesome, and Max Fried has been awesome, Ronaldo Lopez has been really great, right? But other than those four, it just feels like everybody else is kind of playing below their capabilities. Everything else seems to have just gone wrong. A lot of injuries, not just to Strider and Acuna, but of course Riley's been out a good bit. Of course Murphy, a couple other dings here and there. So yeah, everything's just kind of felt off, like the magic. I mean, that's how I've kind of thought of it. Last year, it just felt like there was so much magic that happened in 2023, right? Offensively, especially, it just felt like they were never out of games. They were constantly coming back. They were hitting home runs left and right, which is just fun to experience. And just there hasn't been as much of that this year. Just everything's felt a little off. But guys, we are not that far removed from 2021, and I have to keep thinking back to this because that regular season felt off for like a long time, right? And this sure feels like deja vu to me. Do I need to remind you what happened in 2021? Early season team underperformance, injuries. Ronald goes down. The team has to effort together, right? It has to be a team effort to cover up his absence. It's not just one guy. Alex Anthopoulos at the trade deadline has to find additional help. And of course, he got those 4 outfielders, and everything kind of came together. And they won a championship, and they did it without Ronald Acuna. Now, does that mean that's exactly what's going to happen this time around? I don't know. I can't guarantee a championship. Um, Right now, it certainly doesn't feel like that's going to happen. But it didn't feel like that all the way until August of 2021. And that's just true. I went to a game. I remember I went to the game, the very first game. Jock Peterson was a Brave. They had just gotten him at the trade deadline. He was the first guy they got, and they lost that game, and it just didn't feel like they were going to do anything, right? They were like right around 500. Remember, that was the year where they just kept trading wins and losses like at a historic level. Nothing felt magical about that team. And then, of course, everything clicked right. And it happened late. And they played great in the postseason. And so that could happen this year. And certainly this team still is still capable, right? They're still that talented that they could do it. But we're just gonna have to wait and see if they actually do it. That's the great thing about sports. This is certainly a mental challenge, a mental hurdle that this team is going to have to overcome. I will say this team has already experienced a huge mental and emotional challenge, more challenges probably than any other team, at least top team in baseball, right? And I expect that has made them far tougher mentally than most other top teams. I mean, say what you will with the Phillies, they've done it on the field. They've been winning games. They haven't really had to experience much difficulty yet this season. So that doesn't mean that I'm saying that they won't win it and the Braves will just, maybe they'll just keep struggling all year. But I think there is something to the fact that the Braves right now are having to go through some hard things. I think it actually, in some ways, will make them better in the end. They're not better because they lost Acuna, of course, that would be silly to say. But I think mentally, at least, right, they are being made better by these struggles. So if they can figure out some things on the field, and especially at the plate, of course, then this team can still very much vie for a World Series title. Max Fried is pitching like an ace again. I mean, complete games. He went into the 8th inning in his last start. Chris Sale has been tremendous. I mentioned Ronaldo Lopez. They have the arms right now. As long as those guys stay healthy, they have the arms. But they've got to put some things together offensively, obviously. And yeah, it's been a pretty frustrating year offensively. And who saw that coming to begin the year? So what will Alex Anthopoulos do to fill the void left by Ronald? I think that's the last question I want to hit on today with you guys. I expect until the trade deadline approaches, the Braves are going to let Duvall and Kelenic play in the outfield. I actually think that both those guys will probably be a little better with everyday play. Um, I think especially Kelenic is going to benefit from having to face some lefties. I think that keeps you inside the baseball a little bit more. I think there's value to that. And Duvall too, neither of these guys have been extreme split kind of guys. And so I actually think they probably will both be a little better getting every day at bats. So hopefully that means a lot of good things to come for them, but maybe not, right? And by July, maybe Anthopoulos decides to go out and get another outfielder. Thank goodness, by the way, that Alex went out and got Duvall at the end of spring training, right? That move is looking brilliant right now. So obviously he could choose to target more outfield help if their play isn't good enough. That certainly might happen. But one thing I know about Anthopoulos is that he is not a linear thinker. Losing Ronald doesn't necessarily mean he will just try to fill the void with another outfielder. He might choose to strengthen the team in a different area. And if he doesn't go after an outfielder, I actually think the most obvious next area is starting pitcher. It's the biggest potential impact a player can have on a team, the starting pitcher. And Braves starting pitching depth is being tested right now, right? They just lost Smith Shawver for 6 to 8 weeks with an oblique injury. Bryce Elder obviously has not been very good. That fifth starter spot has been rotating again, just like last year. Now they did have Spencer Schwellenbach make his debut last night. I thought he pitched well against the Nationals. He gave up a 3-run homer, which stunk because he was pitching great and had not allowed a run and trying to get through 5. He ends up giving up 3 earned runs, and they lose that game. But I thought he pitched pretty well, and I think potentially he could be an answer. But obviously, these next couple months, I think that's one reason why they brought him up is let's see what we've got here it's another way for Anthopoulos to make a little bit more of an informed decision at the trade deadline. So, we don't know what's going to happen. A lot of games have to be played before the trade deadline, obviously. But I do think Anthopoulos will make a move and strengthen this team. And the fact is, guys, as rough as this start has been, the Braves are still a playoff team. They're going to have to really fight, maybe as hard as they have ever had to fight to win the NL East this year with the Phillies in front of them. But now's the time, right? They did it in 2021. They need to bow up as a team and cover Ronald's absence together. No one guy can do that, obviously. And other than Ozuna, they basically can all hit better. So I do wonder if mentally they were waiting for Ronald to get going for the rest of the offense. I'd heard that, Ronald is kind of the trigger. And as soon as Ronald gets going, the rest of this offense is going to get going. Well, they don't have Ronald to wait for or to wait on anymore. So that's gone. They're just going to have to do it and do it together. Riley's back. Murphy's back. So, guys, it's just time to get going. So I hope they do. And look, we'll be watching. And yeah, it stinks. We'll miss out on watching Ronald Acuna play every day. But we got a lot of other great players to root for, and I certainly will be, guys. I appreciate y'all tuning into another episode of State of the Braves, and I'll talk to you soon.